Tonight, a cold wind moves through stone corridors, carrying the quiet mystery of a world long gone. Torches flicker, shadows stretch across towering walls, and somewhere high above the ground, a small wooden bed waits beneath a heavy wool blanket. Here is the hook we'll follow gently into the dark. How did people truly sleep inside medieval castles, surrounded by ice-cold stone, without freezing before morning ever came? Before we step deeper into this story, take a moment to settle in. If you enjoy calm, immersive history told like a bedtime tale, remember to like, subscribe, and comment. Let me know where you're watching from. Perhaps it's late evening in the United States, early morning in Europe, or the quiet hours before dawn in Canada, or somewhere else in the world. Tell us what time it is for you right now, and whether the night around you feels warm or cold. Now, loosen your shoulders, slow your breathing, and get comfortable. This is a story meant to unfold slowly, like footsteps echoing down a stone hallway. Let your mind wander back in time as we return to the narrative. A medieval castle was not built for comfort. It was built for strength. Thick stone walls rose from the earth like frozen cliffs, meant to stop arrows, fire, and enemies, but not the cold. As night fell, those same walls absorbed the chill of the air, releasing it slowly into every chamber, stairwell, and sleeping room. By winter, the cold did not simply arrive at the castle, it lived there. Imagine the evening settling in. The sun sinks behind the battlements, and the last warmth of the day fades from the stones beneath your feet. Inside, the air grows still and heavy, carrying the faint smell of smoke from fireplaces far below. Servants move quietly, closing wooden shutters over narrow windows, not to keep out light, but to trap what little warmth remains. Beds are not soft or wide by modern standards. Most are wooden frames, raised slightly off the floor to escape the worst of the cold air that creeps along the stone. A mattress might be nothing more than a sack stuffed with straw, feathers, or dried leaves. It rustles softly when you lie down, forming itself to your shape with a gentle whisper. Warmth comes not from the room, but from layers. For the wealthiest, fur pelts are added on top, their weight pressing down like a comforting hand. Even then, breath fogs faintly in the air, and sleep arrives slowly, carefully. Clothing is rarely removed. Nightgowns, stockings, sometimes even caps are worn to bed. Heat is precious, and the body's own warmth must be guarded through the long hours of darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a fire crackles behind a thick wall, its warmth never quite reaching this room, yet offering comfort simply by existing. Outside, wind brushes against the castle walls, but inside, wrapped in layers and silence, the night begins its slow watch. This is how sleep starts in a medieval castle. Not warm, not easy, but possible through patience, preparation, and quiet resilience. As the night deepens, warmth becomes less a matter of fire and more a matter of togetherness. In medieval castles, sleeping alone is rare, especially in colder seasons. Human bodies, after all, are small furnaces, and medieval people understood this instinctively, long before science gave it a name. In the great halls, servants and guards often sleep side by side on simple pallets laid across wooden floors. Blankets overlap, shoulders touch, and the quiet rhythm of breathing slowly sinks. At first, the air feels sharp and unwelcoming, but as minutes pass, shared warmth gathers gently, like a low ember glowing beneath ash. The cold does not vanish, it simply retreats, held at bay by closeness. Even among the nobility, beds are often shared. Husbands, wives, children, and sometimes trusted attendants sleep in the same room, not for lack of privacy, but for survival. Curtains are drawn around larger beds, forming a small fabric chamber that traps heat. Inside these enclosed spaces, candlelight flickers briefly before darkness takes over, and the air becomes noticeably softer, easier to breathe. Animals, too, play a quiet role. In some parts of the castle, small dogs curl near their owners' feet, offering warmth and comfort in equal measure. In humbler areas, livestock housed below living quarters sends rising heat through wooden floors, an unintended but welcome gift during bitter winters. The castle itself seems to settle as people sleep. Footsteps fade, doors stop creaking, and the night watch moves slowly along the walls. Wrapped in layers of wool, fur, and human presence, sleep grows deeper. The cold still presses at the edges of consciousness, but it no longer feels threatening, just part of the world, accepted and endured. In this shared warmth, dreams come more easily. The mind drifts, the body relaxes, and the long medieval night passes one quiet hour at a time. Fire was the castle's fragile heart, always needed, never fully trusted. While roaring hearths filled halls with warmth during the day, nighttime told a different story. Open flames were dangerous companions in a world of wooden beams, straw bedding, and drifting embers. So as evening settled in, fires were carefully reduced, not extinguished, but coaxed into a low, steady glow. In the Lord's chambers or the great hall, a hearth might still breathe softly through the night. Thick logs smoldered beneath a blanket of ash, releasing slow warmth rather than bright flame. The scent of smoke lingered in the air, clinging to stone walls and heavy tapestries. It was not the clean warmth of modern heating, but it was reliable, familiar, and deeply comforting. Servants tended these fires with quiet care. Before sleep, they arranged embers just so, knowing how to stretch a fire's life until morning. Sometimes heated stones or metal fire dogs were placed near beds, radiating stored warmth long after the flames dimmed. In smaller rooms, a single candle might burn for a short while, less for heat and more for reassurance, its light dancing briefly before surrendering to darkness. Still, most sleeping chambers remained cold. Fireplaces were rare in private rooms, and heat traveled poorly through stone. People learned not to rely on fire alone. Instead, they treated it as a background presence, something that made survival easier, not something that guaranteed comfort. As the fire settled into embers, the castle breathed quietly. Smoke drifted upward through chimneys, the last crackle fading into memory. Wrapped in blankets, listening to the distant murmur of flame, sleepers found comfort in knowing that warmth, however faint, had not completely gone. The night stretched onward, slow and patient, guided by the quiet promise of fire that never truly slept. In a medieval castle, warmth was something you built, layer by layer, with patience and care. Clothing did not end when the day ended, simply changed purpose. As night approached, garments became shields against the cold, each one adding a small but meaningful barrier between skin and stone. Closest to the body, soft linen absorbed moisture and helped prevent chills. Over that came wool, thick and dense, prized not for comfort but for its remarkable ability to trap heat even when damp. Sleeves were long, collars high, and seams tight. Nothing was wasted on fashion once the sun went down. Warmth mattered more than appearance. Before lying down, many people pulled on extra socks or leg wrappings. Some wore simple nightcaps, keeping precious heat from escaping through the head. Others wrapped scarves loosely around their necks, breathing through the fabric when the air grew too sharp. These small habits, passed down through generations, made the difference between restless shivering and steady sleep. Bedding followed the same philosophy. Blankets were stacked, not spread thin. Fur pelts lay heavy on top, pressing warmth downward and sealing it in. The weight itself was comforting, anchoring the body against the cold air that pressed from all sides. Beds creaked softly under the load, wood adjusting to the night. Even the floor was considered. Russia's straw or woven mats covered the stone, dulling the chill that rose upward. In wealthier chambers, thick rugs lined the ground and hung on walls, turning bare stone into something softer, quieter, and just a little warmer. Wrapped in these layers, people slept not in luxury, but in careful balance. The cold remained, but it was slowed, softened, held at a distance. Within this cocoon of cloth and habit, the body relaxed, breathing deep and even as the medieval night carried on. Cold air, heavy and invisible, always sinks. Medieval people noticed this long before they could explain it. Over time, castles adapted in subtle ways, lifting sleepers away from the worst chill that crept along stone floors. Beds were raised on sturdy wooden frames, sometimes surprisingly high. Climbing into bed meant stepping up, leaving the coldest air below. Even a small difference in height could make a noticeable change, especially during winter nights when frost clung to the walls. The space beneath the bed was often left open, allowing air to settle there instead of around the body. In humbler corners of the castle, pallets and sleeping benches were placed near walls that absorbed daytime sunlight. South-facing rooms, when available, were prized for sleeping. Stone that had warmed even slightly during the day released its heat slowly at night, offering a gentle, almost imperceptible comfort. Upper floors, though more exposed to wind, were sometimes warmer than ground-level chambers. Heat from kitchens, bakeries, and communal fires rose upward through wooden beams and stairwells. Sleeping above these spaces meant sharing in the warmth of daily life. Even after the castle had grown quiet, curtains played an important role here as well. Hanging around beds or across doorways, they blocked drafts and created smaller, warmer pockets of air. Within these enclosed spaces, breathing felt easier, the cold less sharp. The world beyond the fabric faded, replaced by the soft darkness of sleep. By lifting themselves above the cold physically and thoughtfully, medieval sleepers turned an unforgiving environment into something manageable. The night remained long, the stone still cold, but rest came all the same, drifting in slowly like a gentle tide. The walls of a medieval castle were vast, bare, and relentlessly cold. Stone held on to winter's chill with stubborn determination, releasing it slowly into the night air. To sleep beside such walls without protection would have meant constant discomfort, and so castles were softened, layered, not only with fabric, but with care. Heavy tapestries hung from iron rods, covering entire stretches of wall. By day, they told stories of hunts, battles, and saints. By night, they served a quieter purpose. Thick wool and woven fibers trapped air between fabric and stone, creating a hidden layer of insulation. The difference was subtle, but deeply felt. As you lie in bed, the tapestry nearby absorbs sound as well as cold. The room feels calmer, quieter, wrapped in stillness. Drafts lose their bite, slowed by cloth that barely moves in the darkness. Even the faint echo of the castle footsteps far away. Doors settling feels softened. In smaller rooms, simple hangings or spare blankets are draped along walls and over doorways. Nothing is wasted. Any fabric that can block wind or chill is pressed into service. Over time, these layers give the room a lived-in warmth, a sense that it belongs to the people sleeping within it. The air near the walls no longer feels sharp. Instead, it carries the muted scent of wool and dye, earthy and reassuring. Wrapped in bed, surrounded by fabric and silence, sleep deepens. The castle, once cold and echoing, becomes something closer to a shelter than a fortress. Through the quiet work of tapestries, warmth is gathered not in bursts, but in patience thread by thread, night after night. In medieval castles, survival through cold nights depended not only on objects, but on habits shaped by generations. People learned when to eat, when to sleep, and how to move through the evening in ways that helped the body hold on to warmth. As dusk approached, heavier meals were often taken. Thick stews, dark bread, and warm drinks filled the stomach, and with digestion came heat. The body worked slowly through the food as the night unfolded, producing a steady warmth from within. This was not indulgence, it was preparation. Before bed, movement mattered. Chores were finished, floors swept, animals tended, muscles stayed active, just long enough to keep blood flowing before rest. Only then did people settle down, bodies already warm, less likely to shiver once stillness took over. Sleep itself followed the rhythm of the night. People often went to bed earlier in winter, stretching rest across the longest hours of darkness. Some woke briefly in the middle of the night, tending a fire or shifting blankets, then drifting back into sleep. This broken rhythm felt natural, unhurried, and surprisingly restful. The castle adjusted to these patterns. Bells rang softly to mark hours. Night watchers passed quietly, their footsteps distant and reassuring. Inside sleeping chambers, breathing slowed, the body following a rhythm older than stone walls themselves. In this steady routine, warmth was not forced, it was guided. The night became something predictable, manageable, wrapped in familiar patterns and gentle habits. Medieval sleepers found rest, not in comfort, but in consistency. Winter, in the medieval world, stretched time itself. Nights were long, shadows deep, and sleep was shaped by the slow fading of light rather than clocks. Inside a castle, this darkness was both challenge and comfort, guiding people gently toward rest. As daylight vanished early, candles and oil lamps appeared, their flames small and precious. Light was never wasted. Rooms glowed softly for a short while, just long enough for quiet conversation, prayer, or mending. Then, one by one, lights were extinguished, and darkness claimed the halls. Darkness meant stillness. Without light to stimulate the senses, the body relaxed more easily. Wrapped in blankets, listening to the wind brush against the walls, people surrendered to the night sooner than we do today. Sleep arrived not suddenly, but gradually, like snow settling on stone. The cold outside felt sharper in contrast to the calm within. Shutters rattled faintly. Somewhere, a tower bell marked the passing hour. Yet inside the sleeping chambers, time seemed to slow. Breath deepened, thoughts drifted. The long winter night allowed for deeper rest. With little reason to wake early, sleep stretched across many hours, interrupted only by brief moments of wakefulness. These pauses were quiet, untroubling an adjustment of blankets, a whispered prayer, a glance at fading embers before drifting back under. In the embrace of darkness, the castle rested. Stone, wood, and fabric all settled together, sharing the same slow rhythm. And in that rhythm, warmth lingered just long enough to carry everyone through until morning. Even in the deepest night, cold air was always searching for a way in. Medieval castles were full of hidden paths for windcracks between stones, narrow arrow slits, and long corridors that funneled air like unseen rivers. To sleep through winter, people learned how to slow these drafts, even if they could never fully stop them. Heavy wooden doors were closed early in the evening, their iron hinges groaning softly before settling into silence. Gaps beneath them were stuffed with cloth, straw, or spare garments. These simple barriers dulled the bite of cold air creeping along the floors. turning sharp gusts into gentle, almost unnoticed movements. Windows were small by design, but even they needed guarding. Shutters were pulled tight and secured, sometimes reinforced with fabric or leather hangings. Glass, when present at all, was thick and uneven, more suggestion than shield. Still, every layer mattered. Within rooms, furniture became part of the defense. Chests, benches, and screens were positioned carefully to block airflow. Beds were placed away from direct drafts, tucked into corners where the air felt calmer. Over time, these arrangements became tradition, passed down not in words, but in practice. As the night settled, the room grew quieter. The restless movement of air slowed, and the cold softened into a steady presence rather than an intrusion. Wrapped in blankets, listening to the distant wind outside, sleepers felt protected, even within walls never meant to be warm. These silent barriers did not defeat the cold. They simply taught it to move more slowly, and sometimes that was enough. In the stillness of a medieval night, sound carried warmth of its own. Absolute silence was rare inside a castle, and that gentle background of noise often brought comfort rather than disturbance. Somewhere below, a fire shifted, releasing a soft crackle that echoed faintly through stone passages. Wooden beams expanded and contracted as temperatures dropped, producing low creaks that felt almost like the castle breathing. These sounds were familiar, expected, and oddly reassuring. Beyond the walls, the world continued quietly. Wind brushed against towers, owls called from nearby woods, and distant guards murmured as they changed watch. These noises reminded sleepers that they were not alone, that life continued even as darkness wrapped the land. Inside shared chambers, the slow rhythm of breathing filled the air. Someone shifted under blankets. A dog sighed in its sleep. These small sounds carried warmth in their own way, easing the mind and allowing the body to relax fully. For medieval people, these nighttime noises were part of safety. Silence often meant danger: an empty hall, a fire gone out, a watchman missing. Gentle sound meant all was well. Wrapped in wool and routine, sleep deepened as the castle spoke softly around them. The cold remained present, but less threatening. With each familiar sound, the mind drifted further from discomfort and closer to rest, carried by the quiet language of the night. In many medieval castles, heat was not only carried by flames, it was stored in stone. Large flat stones near hearths were heated during the day, absorbing sunlight and fire warmth. At night, these stones released their heat slowly, acting as silent, patient radiators. Some bedrooms had a small hearth with stones carefully arranged. Before sleep, these stones were moved closer to the bed or wrapped in cloth, allowing their residual warmth to touch ankles, feet, or hands. Even the faint heat radiating upward could make the difference between restless shivering and a gradual, soothing sleep. Wealthier chambers often had metal containers filled with hot coals or stones, placed under bedding or in footboxes. The warmth was intense but controlled, giving the sleeper a reliable source of heat throughout the night. Careful placement ensured safety: no stray sparks, no sudden flames, just gentle, constant comfort. For those without such luxuries, heavy blankets and layered clothing mimicked the effect. The body's own warmth was trapped against stone, combined with straw or rushes, creating small pockets of cozy air. Every detail mattered, from how the blankets were folded to how one positioned their body on the mattress. In this quiet work of heat and stone, the night became less hostile. The cold was still present, sharp at the edges, but manageable. By learning to harness warmth patiently, medieval sleepers transformed the castle's unyielding stone into a partner in rest, rather than an enemy. How one slept in a medieval castle mattered as much as what one slept with. Positioning was not merely comfort, it was strategy against the cold. People learned to align their bodies with warmth, drafts, and the limited heat sources available. Beds were often pushed against walls that absorbed the most daytime sun, or away from open windows and corridors. Feet were sometimes tucked near the fire-heated stones, while heads were positioned toward the calmest corner of the room. Even the simplest adjustment, a slight turn of the body or curling inward, could trap warmth efficiently. Sleeping curled into a fetal position was common, though not just for comfort. It conserved body heat by reducing surface area exposed to the cold air. Arms wrapped around the torso, legs drawn close, blankets tucked tightly. These were unconscious techniques, honed over generations. Shared sleeping arrangements amplified this effect. When people slept side by side, even slight shifts created overlapping warmth zones. Couples, families, and groups of servants relied on each other as living radiators, their bodies forming a protective barrier against the cold that no stone wall or tapestry could fully provide. Even the smallest details mattered. A pillow stuffed with straw could raise the head just enough to keep the neck warm, while leaving space beneath the shoulders allowed air to circulate gently without chilling the body. Every habit, every arrangement, was a subtle dance with the cold. Through careful positioning, medieval sleepers turned vulnerability into control. They did not defeat the winter night entirely, but they learned to coexist with it, finding peace in the small triumphs of warmth and comfort. In many medieval bedrooms, candlelight served as more than illumination. It became a companion for the night, softening darkness and offering subtle comfort against the cold. Though small and fragile, candles gave warmth in a way that modern lights rarely replicate. Intimate, immediate, and slowly fading. A single taper might be placed on a low wooden table, a small flickering flame dancing across walls and tapestries. Its heat was slight, barely noticeable to the touch, but the psychological warmth it provided was profound. Shadows softened, and the mind, sensitive to light and dark, relaxed in a rhythm set by the flame's gentle flicker. Candlelight also guided subtle movement. A servant checking on a fire or adjusting blankets moved quietly, soothed by the warm glow and reassured by the presence of another. In wealthier rooms, multiple candles created a layered pool of light, offering faint warmth to beds and stones nearby. As the candle burned, its wax slowly softened, releasing a subtle scent of tallow or beeswax. The aroma mingled with wool, straw, and smoke from distant fires, creating an enveloping atmosphere. It was comforting, grounding, a small signal that the night was under control, not entirely ruled by cold and darkness. Eventually, candles were snuffed, one by one, but even as their flames died, the impression of warmth lingered in the mind. The body, already nestled in layers of cloth, continued to feel protected. Sleep deepened, flowing gently like a river through the castle's stone halls, accompanied by memory of the candle's soft, reassuring glow. One of the quieter, cleverest inventions in medieval sleep was the footbox, a small wooden or metal container designed to keep feet warm through the coldest nights. In an era without modern heating, feet were especially vulnerable to chill, and a frozen pair could make sleep impossible. These boxes were lined with straw, wool, or even small heated stones. Before bed, the sleeper would tuck their feet inside, closing the lid loosely enough to allow air to circulate, but tightly enough to trap heat. The effect was immediate. The feet, often the first part of the body to feel cold, now rested in a gentle, stable warmth. Footboxes were common among the wealthier inhabitants of castles, but even humble rooms found ways to improvise. a folded blanket at the end of a bed, a small basket with heated embers handled carefully, or even the shared presence of another body could serve a similar purpose. The principle remained the same: concentrated, localized heat where it mattered most. This small act slipping feet into a box, feeling warmth surround them, had more than a physical effect. It gave a sense of control, a quiet confidence that sleep could be enduring. The mind relaxed alongside the body, knowing that even in a stone room with winter wind outside, there was safety, there was warmth. As the night deepened, footboxes continued their work silently. Their warmth radiated slowly upward, touching ankles, calves, and eventually the rest of the body. Sleep arrived gradually, comfortably, carried on a tide of layered blankets, human presence, and clever inventions designed for survival. A simple piece of cloth, the nightcap, might seem trivial to modern eyes, yet in medieval castles it held profound importance. With the head being one of the fastest areas for heat loss, covering it at night was not about fashion, it was about survival. Nightcaps were made from linen, wool, or sometimes softer materials for the wealthier. They were snug but not constricting, designed to trap warmth without causing discomfort. In some cases, a second layer of cloth might be wrapped around the neck and ears, creating a cocoon that preserved precious heat. Sleeping with a nightcap was more than functional. It provided a sense of ritual and preparation, signaling that the day's work was complete and that rest could safely begin. As the cap settled over hair and forehead, a subtle pressure pressed warmth down into the shoulders and torso, complementing blankets and layered clothing. Children often wore them even in the warmest rooms, a habit learned early. Adults, especially in winter, rarely removed theirs. In the cold stone chambers, the head's warmth became the anchor for the rest of the body, helping the sleeper drift into longer, deeper rest. Together with blankets, footboxes, and layered clothing, nightcaps formed another quiet layer in the complex system of medieval warmth. The cold was never fully gone, but it was softened, slowed, and held at bay, allowing sleep to arrive as gently as a snowfall settling over battlements and courtyards. In every medieval castle, night brought both rest and vigilance. While most slept, a few remained awake, patrolling corridors and towers to ensure safety. Their quiet presence contributed indirectly to warmth and comfort, offering reassurance that the cold night held no greater danger. Guards moved silently along drafty hallways, their footsteps muffled by rushes or rugs. Occasionally, the soft jingle of armor or the distant call of a sentry reminded sleepers that life continued beyond their chambers. This quiet rhythm of protection allowed the castle's inhabitants to relax more fully, knowing that human presence counted both danger and isolation. Even in private rooms, attendants might remain nearby. They tended fires, rearranged blankets, or brought hot water for washing. Their movements were gentle, respectful of those resting, yet constant enough to create a sense of continuity. The castle was not empty. It was alive in a subtle, comforting way. The knowledge that others shared responsibility for survival, whether by standing watch or maintaining warmth, created a unique sense of security. Cold could be harsh, stone could be unforgiving, but in these castles, people were never truly alone. Sleep deepened in this atmosphere of quiet guardianship. Each gentle sound, each shadow passing beyond the doorway, contributed to a layered comfort that extended beyond blankets or fire. The night, though long and cold, became a shared experience, carrying the promise of morning. Even when the fire in a bedroom was small or absent, the castle itself provided a subtle, constant source of heat. Kitchens and great halls below continued to burn, their fires radiating warmth upward through wooden beams and floors. This quiet hum of heat was never strong, but it created a gentle background comfort that helped medieval sleepers endure long nights. Through thick stone floors, warmth rose slowly. Rooms directly above kitchens could feel just a touch softer, just enough to soothe shivering limbs. In larger castles, hot ashes or glowing embers from the day's hearths were sometimes transferred to braziers in sleeping chambers, extending their effect into the quiet darkness. Even faint warmth had a psychological effect. The knowledge that life and fire persisted below, that the castle was alive with preparation and care, allowed the mind to relax. Breath became slower, muscles softened, and the body responded to these gentle signals, resting easier in the chill. The hum of the hearth was not constant, it shifted with drafts, closed doors, and nighttime routines. Yet, in its imperfection, it created a living rhythm. Every sleeper adapted, aligning themselves to its pulses. Feet might be tucked toward the faint heat, blankets arranged to trap what little warmth reached upward, and bodies turned instinctively to maximize comfort. Through this quiet interplay of stone, fire, and human awareness, medieval castles became surprisingly livable at night. The cold never vanished entirely, but its edges were softened, and sleep found a gentle, patient rhythm in the shadowed halls. In a medieval bedroom, blankets were more than protection, they were a gentle, constant presence. Heavy woolen layers pressed softly against the body, insulating and reassuring in equal measure. Unlike modern bedding, which often prioritizes lightness and softness, medieval blankets were dense, coarse, and effective, providing both warmth and a comforting weight that encouraged stillness. As sleepers settled in, the first layer of wool absorbed the slight chill, clinging to linen sheets. Additional layers were added slowly, creating a thick, enveloping cocoon. Each fold trapped air, each overlapping edge slowed drafts, and the combined weight pressed warmth downward, making it easier for the body to relax completely. For children, the weight of wool could feel like a gentle embrace. For adults, it became a familiar companion, shifting slightly as they moved in sleep, but never failing to retain heat. Even the faint rustle of blankets settling against the stone bed frame contributed to the quiet rhythm of the night. In combination with other measures, nightcaps, footboxes, and layered clothing, the weight of wool created a slow, persistent heat that carried sleepers through hours of darkness. The cold remained at the edges, but it no longer dominated. Instead, it became a soft background note against which the warmth of preparation and routine resonated. Through this soothing weight, medieval people discovered a remarkable intimacy with their surroundings. Stone walls, winter air, and distant winds became less threatening. The body, embraced by wool and layered care, drifted deeper into rest, steady and unhurried. Many castle inhabitants did not sleep alone. Rooms often held multiple sleepers, and the shared presence of others became a quiet source of warmth and reassurance. Even in cold chambers, human bodies generated heat that slowly spread across the space, softening drafts and making the stone walls feel less severe. In these communal arrangements, movement was subtle and careful. Shifts in sleep were minimal, yet every slight adjustment added to collective comfort. Bodies tucked closer together, heads aligned to shared pillows or blankets, and hands rested near one another. The heat of one body warmed the edge of another, creating a living network of warmth. Beyond temperature, shared rooms carried a psychological comfort. The soft rhythm of breathing, occasional sighs, and faint murmurs reminded sleepers that they were not alone. In a world where the night could be long and the stone unforgiving, this presence was a quiet, reassuring anchor. Even in rooms with only two sleepers, the effect was notable. Couples, siblings or companions leaned subtly toward each other, instinctively maximizing the warmth shared. Blankets were folded or layered to cover both, and small adjustments became nightly rituals, honed through experience. This gentle hum of shared warmth carried sleepers through the longest hours. Cold remained at the edges, but it no longer felt threatening. The night became a living, breathing space, where the bodies of those resting together created a slow, soothing current of comfort. Corners in medieval castles were more than architectural necessities. They were safe havens from cold drafts and sharp winter winds. People learned to use every edge of a room to their advantage, tucking beds and pallets into spaces where stone walls met, where air currents slowed, and where warmth could gather naturally. Sleeping in a corner meant less exposure to the open room. Two solid stone walls acted as shields, absorbing some heat from the day and offering slight protection against the night's chill. Curtains could be drawn around these spaces, forming an intimate microcosm of warmth where sleepers felt more secure. Even in shared rooms, corners were prized. A child might sleep at the back of the bed, tucked into a corner, shielded by the walls and the bodies of those beside them. Adults might claim a similar position, layering blankets and furs in a way that captured the maximum heat and minimized exposure to drafts. The mind, too, responded to corners. Walls provided a sense of enclosure, safety, and quiet, which helped the body relax. Stone, while cold, became part of a carefully constructed comfort system rather than an enemy. The combined effect of walls, blankets, and human presence created a small pocket of peace within the vast, echoing castle. In these tucked corners, sleep became easier, deeper, and more restorative. Even as cold lingered elsewhere, the body and mind found a gentle sanctuary, proving that sometimes the simplest architectural features could be the most effective allies against winter's bite. In medieval castles, silence was rare, and the subtle sounds of the night played a critical role in easing sleepers into rest. The occasional creak of wooden beams, the distant footsteps of night watchmen, or the soft rustle of blankets all became part of a comforting, familiar rhythm. These noises signaled life and continuity. Even the wind brushing against battlements or rattling shutters carried a sense of normalcy, reminding sleepers that the castle was alive and inhabited. The body, attuned to this gentle background, found reassurance amidst the chill of stone walls. Some sounds also helped mask harsher noises. The crackle of embers, for example, could dampen the perception of sudden gusts or drafts. Shared sleeping quarters amplified this effect. A soft breathing and shifting bodies created a living hum that filled the room, smoothing over sharp environmental sounds. The mind, soothed by this ambient presence, released tension slowly. Sleep arrived gradually, carried on the quiet cadence of the castle's nightly life. Even in freezing chambers, the combination of human and environmental sounds created a protective cocoon, transforming raw cold into a tolerable, almost gentle backdrop for rest. In this way, the medieval night was not simply endured, it was guided. Sound, like warmth, was a tool, subtly shaping the rhythm of sleep and lending comfort where blankets or fires alone could not. Curtains in a medieval castle were more than decorative luxuries. They were essential tools against the chill of night. Thick, heavy fabrics hung over beds, doorways, and even windows, forming quiet microclimates that transformed cold stone rooms into spaces more conducive to rest. Around beds, curtains created a private cocoon. They blocked drafts, trapped heat from bodies and bedding, and softened the movement of air. The effect was almost magical, a small, enclosed space where warmth gathered and lingered, and where the cold outside felt distant. almost irrelevant. Curtains also muffled sound. The castle's stone corridors echoed icily, and the faint clatter of distant activity could disturb rest. Hanging fabrics softened these echoes, producing a quieter, more serene atmosphere. Sleepers could lie undisturbed, cocooned in darkness and warmth, while the world continued its subtle hum outside. Even when shared rooms were crowded, individual beds were often curtained off. This allowed each person a small domain of comfort, where blankets, nightcaps, and personal positioning worked best. Within these curtained spaces, the mind felt safer, and the body could relax more fully into sleep. By the dim light of a single candle or the lingering glow of embers, the gentle sway of curtains added to the night's rhythm. They moved slightly with draught and breath, creating a slow, almost hypnotic motion that calmed the senses. In medieval castles, such small, thoughtful measures turned cold, unyielding rooms into intimate sanctuaries for rest. Beyond curtains and clothing, medieval sleepers relied heavily on the careful layering of bedding. Each layer served a specific purpose, working in concert to create warmth that could withstand long, freezing nights. Blankets, straw-filled mattresses, furs, and even spare garments were stacked meticulously, forming a cocoon that preserved body heat efficiently. The bottom layer, often a mattress or pallet filled with straw or rushes, insulated the sleeper from the cold stone beneath. Though simple, it offered slight give and prevented direct contact with the chill of the floor. Over this, linen sheets provided softness and moisture absorption, crucial in a room where the air could feel damp and biting. Next came wool blankets, dense and heavy, trapping heat while pressing gently against the body. For the wealthier, furse fox, rabbit, or even bear were laid atop blankets, adding both insulation and comfort. The combined effect of these layers was subtle but profound. Cold air was kept at bay, and the body could gradually reach equilibrium with its surroundings. Arranging these layers required patience. Blankets were tucked, furs adjusted, and edges overlapped to prevent gaps where cold could creep in. The process became a nightly ritual, one that prepared the body and mind for deep, restorative sleep. Even as the wind whistled outside and stone walls absorbed the chill of night, the layers within the bed worked silently, faithfully, to preserve warmth. Wrapped in this careful system, the body surrendered slowly to rest, knowing that every layer was an ally in the quiet battle against cold. The night, though long and unyielding, became manageable, softened by human ingenuity and patience. One of the most ingenious methods medieval people used to stay warm at night was the heated stone. Stones were placed near fireplaces during the day, absorbing sunlight and the fire's energy. Once warmed, they were moved carefully into beds or footboxes at night, providing a slow, gentle source of heat that radiated steadily through blankets. The warmth from these stones was subtle but persistent. Unlike a roaring fire, it didn't create sudden bursts of heat, which could be uncomfortable. Instead, it offered a slow, soothing radiance that touched the feet, legs, and occasionally the hands of the sleeper. Wrapped in blankets, the heat spread gradually, enveloping the body in comfort without ever becoming overwhelming. In wealthier chambers, multiple stones could be used, sometimes wrapped in cloth to prevent burns and placed strategically under sheets or furs. In humbler quarters, a single stone tucked at the end of the bed could make the difference between shivering and drifting off peacefully. The psychological effect was equally important. Knowing that warmth existed within reach allowed the mind to relax. Even if the stone cooled over the night, the act of preparation itself, placing stones, arranging blankets, adjusting furs, created a sense of control and readiness, soothing the anxious anticipation of cold hours. Through this subtle partnership of human ingenuity and natural materials, the medieval night became less hostile. The stones did not banish the chill entirely, but they offered a comforting pulse of heat, a gentle rhythm that encouraged the body to surrender to the slow, calming embrace of sleep. Animals were more than companions in medieval castles. They were small sources of warmth and reassurance during cold nights. Dogs, cats, and sometimes even smaller livestock contributed subtle heat, curling near beds or at the foot of pallets, sharing body warmth with humans in exchange for care and shelter. A dog might rest against a child's feet, its body radiating steady heat that pushed back against the chill of stone floors. Cats often nestled near corners or atop furs, adding a soft, comforting weight. Even their gentle movements, stretching, purring, or shifting offered a familiar rhythm, lulling humans toward deeper sleep. In servant quarters, small animals sleeping close to multiple bodies created shared heat networks. The combined warmth of human and animal bodies made the room feel less harsh, less exposed. Breath and heartbeats blended into a quiet, living hum that softened the sharp edges of night. Beyond warmth, the presence of animals provided psychological comfort. The quiet weight of a sleeping dog or the soft purr of a cat signaled life and vigilance, subtle guardians against the stillness that could feel oppressive in large stone rooms. Even in the coldest hours, these companions offered reassurance and a gentle sense of companionship. Through these small, intentional placements, the castle's inhabitants learned to maximize every source of comfort. Animals became integral to surviving the long winter nights, a living layer of warmth, presence, and quiet reassurance alongside blankets, footboxes, and heated stones. Routine was as vital to medieval sleep as blankets or fires. People followed patterns honed over generations, each step preparing the body and mind for the long night ahead. The rhythm of evening chores, meals, prayers, and preparation created a predictable structure that made the cold more bearable. Before bed, floors were swept, fires tended, and animals checked. Meals were timed to provide warmth through digestion, and water was brought for washing. Each task, though mundane, carried an unspoken purpose, to ensure that when the body finally rested, it could do so fully and securely. Sleep itself was aligned with this rhythm. Many retired earlier during winter months, stretching rest across the longest hours of darkness. Waking during the night for brief chores or fire tending was expected, yet the body learned to flow in and out of these moments without losing the overall pattern of rest. This habitual approach extended to bedding as well. Blankets, furs, and footboxes were arranged in the same way nightly, creating a familiar, comforting environment. Even minor adjustments, stucking edges differently, stacking layers just so became part of the ritual, reinforcing the body's sense of security. Through routine, the cold became predictable and manageable. The mind, conditioned to the evening's steps, relaxed more easily. By the time sleep fully arrived, the castle and its inhabitants had formed a quiet partnership, stone, air, and human effort working together to sustain warmth, comfort, and the gentle rhythm of night. In medieval castles, the human body itself was one of the most reliable sources of warmth. People learned to use this natural heat carefully, whether sleeping alone or in shared chambers. Every position, every touch of skin against fabric or another body, contributed to a quiet system of survival. Sleeping close to others' family members, spouses, or companions was both practical and comforting. Heat radiated outward, warming nearby bodies, blankets, and even the surrounding air. Over time, sleepers instinctively positioned themselves to maximize shared warmth, shoulders slightly overlapping, legs curled toward each other, heads aligned to preserve heat in the neck and chest. Even alone, the body's warmth could be preserved through strategic layering. Footboxes held heat at the extremities, thick blankets trapped air near the skin, and nightcaps prevented precious warmth from escaping the head. The combined effect allowed people to endure long hours in stone chambers that might otherwise have been unbearably cold. This reliance on the body created a subtle intimacy with the night itself. Sleep became an interplay between human warmth and environmental cold, a slow negotiation rather than a confrontation. The body adjusted gradually, finding comfort in layers, movement, and shared presence. In this way, the castle's inhabitants harnessed their own natural heat, turning the human form into a living, breathing ally against winter's chill. The cold never fully disappeared, but it became softened, held at bay by the patient, steady rhythm of the body itself. Even the best-laid blankets and heated stones could not fully conquer the cold if drafts infiltrated the room. Medieval people became keenly aware of the subtle ways air moved through castles, and they developed strategies to slow or block these unwelcome currents. Doors were sealed with fabric, straw, or even spare clothing tucked beneath them to stop cold air from creeping along the stone floors. Windows, when present, were shuttered tightly, sometimes reinforced with heavy cloth or leather hangings. Even narrow arrow slits were shielded with tapestries or wood, reducing wind that might channel through hallways. Inside sleeping chambers, furniture served as a defensive layer. Chests, benches, and screens were placed strategically to disrupt airflow, protecting beds from sudden gusts. Curtains around beds added another barrier, keeping warmth trapped within the enclosed space and muffling both cold air and distant noise. Every adjustment was subtle, practiced over years of living in stone rooms. Even small changes, moving a blanket slightly, adjusting a pillow, or sliding a chest closer to a wall made a tangible difference. These acts of vigilance became part of nightly routine, blending seamlessly with the habits of dressing, layering, and preparing bedding. Through careful management of drafts, medieval sleepers transformed harsh, cold chambers into spaces where warmth could persist. The chill remained at the edges, but it was slowed, softened, and rendered manageable, allowing rest to arrive in a gentle, patient rhythm. In the cold stone chambers of a medieval castle, clothing worn to bed was crucial. People did not remove their garments entirely at night. Instead, they layered thoughtfully, combining warmth, comfort, and protection against the chill. Linen nightshirts were common, soft against the skin and capable of absorbing moisture to prevent shivering. Over these, woolen layers were added long gowns, stockings, and even wrapped scarves or shawls. The head was almost always covered with a nightcap, conserving vital heat and protecting against drafts that swept through high windows or gaps in walls. Children and adults alike followed similar principles. Smaller limbs were carefully wrapped, often tucked into layers of blankets or furs, while adults relied on heavier wool and the added warmth of shared sleeping arrangements. Even in the wealthiest chambers, attention to nightwear was meticulous, a practical form of preparation for the long, cold hours ahead. Nighttime clothing worked in tandem with bedding and environmental measures. Footboxes held the extremities warm, curtains blocked drafts, heated stones radiated gentle heat, and shared warmth from nearby sleepers created a slow, cumulative comfort. Each piece of clothing was a thread in a network of survival strategies, carefully layered and adjusted to preserve life and rest. Through these simple but essential garments, medieval sleepers turned vulnerability into resilience. Cold remained present, but it became a manageable, softened companion rather than a threat, allowing the mind and body to drift slowly, safely into the embrace of sleep. Stillness was one of the most powerful allies against the cold in medieval castles. Movement stirred the chill that clung to stone floors and walls, while quiet, motionless bodies allowed warmth to accumulate and linger. People learned to slow their breathing, settle deeply into layered bedding, and resist unnecessary shifting once the night had begun. Even minor adjustments were calculated. Limbs were repositioned carefully, blankets smoothed over gaps, and furs shifted just enough to retain heat. Every subtle action mattered, turning sleep into a slow, deliberate process rather than a sudden surrender. The castle itself seemed to reward stillness. Stone walls absorbed sound and draft alike, releasing faint warmth only when bodies remained settled. The hum of fires below and the distant steps of guards became part of a gentle, predictable rhythm, reinforcing the quiet and allowing the mind to let go. Stillness also had a psychological effect. In darkness and cold, motion can create awareness of vulnerability. By remaining calm and motionless, sleepers cultivated a sense of security, trusting the blankets, stones, and routines they had prepared. Gradually, tension melted away, replaced by the soothing embrace of layered warmth. In this slow, deliberate quiet, sleep arrived naturally. Even in freezing chambers, the body learned to adapt, finding comfort in the patience and consistency of the night. The chill remained at the edges, but stillness transformed it from a threat into a gentle, manageable presence. Even without roaring fires in every room, medieval bedrooms were filled with subtle scents that contributed to comfort and warmth. The mingling of wool, straw, furs, and the faint smoke from distant hearths created a quiet, enveloping aroma that soothed both mind and body. The smell of wool and straw, earthy and slightly sweet, reminded sleepers of preparation and care. Furs carried a muted, natural scent, adding to the sense of coziness and enclosure. In some rooms, the faint trace of tallow from candles lingered, a soft, reassuring fragrance that marked the presence of light and warmth earlier in the evening. Even distant smoke from kitchens or great halls filtered through cracks in the stone, carrying a low, comforting hum of life and activity. These scents worked subtly, shaping the subconscious experience of the night. They reassured, grounded, and signaled the persistence of warmth even in cold stone rooms. As sleepers lay in their layered bedding, wrapped in blankets and furs, the combination of warmth, sound, and scent created a multi-sensory cocoon. The mind could relax, drifting naturally toward sleep, while the body retained the gentle heat accumulated from layers, heated stones, and the presence of others. Through these subtle aromas, the castle itself contributed to the rhythm of rest. The cold outside remained, but it was softened by the sensory tapestry inside, helping medieval sleepers achieve a calm, patient, and restorative night. As the night deepened, all the preparations, layers of clothing, blankets, furs, heated stones, nightcaps, and shared warmth began to work in concert. Sleep arrived not suddenly, but gradually, like a gentle tide creeping over a quiet shore. Breath slowed, muscles released tension. The faint rustle of blankets, the soft creak of wood, and the distant hum of fires below became part of the rhythm of rest rather than disruptions. Even the chill of stone walls faded into the periphery, acknowledged but no longer commanding attention. Medieval sleepers often experienced a segmented sleep. First, a deep initial rest, followed by quiet waking for short chores, fire tending, or bathroom needs, and then a return to rest. These brief moments did not disturb the body's overall rhythm. Rather, they became woven into the long night, a familiar ebb and flow of activity and calm. Shared rooms magnified this effect. The soft, synchronized breathing of others created a living backdrop of reassurance. The presence of another body, even quietly shifting, added a subtle layer of warmth and companionship that soothed the mind further. In these hours, the castle seemed to fade around its inhabitants. Stone walls, wooden beams, and distant corridors receded into quiet background, leaving warmth, layered textiles, and the human body's own heat to cradle sleepers gently. Night became not something to endure, but a slow, immersive experience where cold was softened and rest arrived in unhurried waves. Furs were prized possessions in medieval castles, valued not only for status but for their remarkable ability to provide warmth. Draped over beds, layered under blankets, or used as cushions, furs created soft, insulating surfaces that kept cold from seeping into the body. The texture of fur thick, dense, and slightly springy trapped air naturally, adding another invisible layer of warmth. Sleeping atop a fox or rabbit pelt was more than comfort. It was a practical method of survival. Even a single fur strategically placed at the feet or along the torso could make the difference between restless shivering and slow, steady sleep. Furs also contributed to the psychological sense of security. Their weight and texture offered tactile reassurance, a familiar companion in otherwise harsh stone chambers. Children often pressed against the soft surfaces, enjoying both warmth and the soothing presence of natural material, while adults adjusted their blankets and furs with careful attention to maximize insulation. Combined with blankets, heated stones, nightcaps, and layered clothing, furs formed part of a complex system of nighttime comfort. Cold was never fully gone, but it was slowed and softened, rendered manageable by materials and knowledge passed through generations. In the embrace of these furs, medieval sleepers felt cocooned and protected. Sleep came more easily, carried by layers of warmth, routine, and quiet presence, transforming cold, unyielding stone rooms into intimate sanctuaries of rest. Stone walls, while cold to the touch, became allies in subtle ways. When beds were placed against them, the walls absorbed faint heat from daylight and nearby fires, slowly releasing it through the night. This residual warmth, though minimal, created pockets of slightly softer air, a gentle difference that sleepers learned to use. Corners and wall-adjacent spaces became prime sleeping spots. The walls blocked drafts and offered a sense of enclosure, creating microclimates within otherwise harsh chambers. Draped tapestries or curtains added insulation, softening both sound and air currents. Within these spaces, warmth felt concentrated, the cold relegated to the edges. Even in shared rooms, walls provided psychological comfort. Leaning a back or shoulder against stone, lying with the head near a wall corner, or tucking limbs toward the enclosure created a sense of protection. Combined with layered bedding and human presence, these spaces became quiet sanctuaries. The interaction of walls, bedding, and warmth was subtle, almost imperceptible, but profoundly effective. The cold was present, yes, but moderated, slowed, and softened. In these small adjustments, medieval sleepers turned architecture itself into a partner in the long, slow rhythm of the night. Layering blankets was an almost meditative practice in medieval castles. Each fold and overlap had a purpose, carefully designed to trap air and create pockets of warmth. Wool was the most common material, chosen for its density and insulating properties, while wealthier chambers added furs on top for both heat and comfort. The arrangement of blankets was deliberate. The first layer lay close to the body, absorbing heat and preventing contact with cold linen sheets. Subsequent layers built upward, each one slightly heavier and denser, creating a cocoon that pressed warmth gently downward. Edges were tucked to prevent drafts, and any gaps were filled with smaller cloths or garments. Shared beds amplified this effect. Bodies nestled closely together, blankets overlapped strategically, and the combination of human heat and fabric insulation created a living, dynamic warmth that extended through the night. Even a small shift in position was calculated to maintain the integrity of these thermal layers. Beyond physical warmth, the layering process carried a psychological comfort. Arranging blankets, smoothing furs, and tucking edges became a nightly ritual that signaled readiness for rest. The mind relaxed alongside the body, reassured by preparation and routine. Through this subtle art, medieval sleepers achieved a slow, enveloping warmth that made stone walls, drafts, and long nights bearable. Sleep arrived gradually, carried by layers, presence, and careful attention to comfort. In crowded medieval chambers, the presence of others provided warmth, not only through body heat, but also through the gentle rhythm of shared breathing. Lying close together, sleepers became attuned to the subtle rise and fall of chests, the soft exhalation of air mingling with the scent of wool and furs. This rhythm was calming, almost hypnotic. The sound and motion of others' breathing reassured the mind, signaling safety and continuity. Even in the coldest rooms, this living cadence created a sense of security that blankets or heated stones alone could not provide. Children learned early to find comfort in shared warmth. Parents and siblings formed living barriers against drafts, pressing gently together or arranging furs and blankets to trap heat in between. Adults adjusted positions minimally, respecting the warmth and rhythm of those around them, allowing the collective heat to circulate naturally. The quiet, synchronized breathing became a part of the night's slow pulse. Even when momentarily awake, a sleeper could feel the steady, comforting presence of others and drift back into deeper rest. This communal rhythm, invisible yet potent, was as important as any other measure against the chill of medieval winters. Through these subtle, shared signals, the cold was softened. The night stretched on, long and quiet, but the combined warmth of boaties, breaths, and layered materials carried all within toward peaceful, restorative sleep. The process of preparing for sleep in a medieval castle was itself a source of warmth. Every small action, arranging blankets, lighting or tending candles, checking footboxes, smoothing furs, added both physical heat and a sense of control over the cold environment. These rituals were slow and deliberate. People moved carefully to avoid letting warmth escape, whether from open doors, shifting blankets, or the placement of heated stones. Even simple gestures, like brushing down a mattress or folding an extra layer of cloth over the edge of a bed, created subtle increases in comfort. The psychological impact was profound. Performing familiar, repeated actions reassured the mind, signaling that everything was prepared and in order. This sense of readiness reduced anxiety, allowing the body to relax fully into sleep. The cold, while present, became something manageably a predictable companion rather than a threat. Ritual also reinforced awareness of warmth sources. The sleeper learned how best to position their body, how to layer textiles efficiently, and how to combine human heat with objects like heated stones and footboxes. Over time, these practices became instinctual, guiding the body into a slow, unhurried rest. Through preparation and ritual, medieval sleepers turned practical necessity into a gentle, comforting process. The night stretched long and cold, yet by layering care, attention, and knowledge, warmth persisted, carrying each person steadily into sleep. By the time the clock, or rather, the natural rhythm of night reached its deepest hours, stillness enveloped the castle. The corridors were silent. The fires in the halls below dimmed to smoldering embers, and the occupants of chambers lay wrapped in layers of warmth, breathing slowly, deeply, and evenly. This stillness magnified the effects of every precaution taken before sleep. Heated stones radiated faint, steady warmth. Blankets and furs retained the body's heat. Footboxes cradled extremities. Nightcaps kept heads cozy. Drafts were slowed or blocked, leaving air around the bed calm and manageable. Even the stone walls contributed subtly, releasing residual heat absorbed during the day. The quiet also had a psychological effect. With activity paused, the mind no longer anticipated interruptions or dangers. The rhythmic sounds of distant watchmen or the soft breathing of fellow sleepers became part of a soothing background rather than distractions. In this serene state, the body could fully surrender to rest. In the deep night, the castle transformed. Stone, wood, textiles, and human presence blended into a cocoon of calm and warmth. Cold lingered, yes, but softened by preparation, shared presence, and layered insulation. It became almost imperceptible. Sleep flowed naturally, slow and restorative, carrying the sleeper gently toward dawn. As the first hints of light touched the castle walls, the long winter night began to shift. The air remained cold, but a subtle change in rhythm signaled that the hours of deepest rest were passing. The stillness of midnight softened into a gentle prelude to morning activity. Sleepers stirred slowly. Some shifted under blankets, stretching limbs gradually to retain warmth. Footboxers released the last traces of heat, and furs and wool maintained their comforting presence. Even the faint filtered sunlight helped signal the body that rest was nearing completion. In shared rooms, breathing remained synchronized for a few moments, then softened individually as each occupant woke gradually. The ritual of rising was deliberate. Layers were carefully adjusted, blankets folded, and fires, if any remained low, were tended once more. Warmth, accumulated over hours, was preserved to carry the day forward. The approach of dawn was quiet, unhurried, and gentle, reflecting the rhythm of life within the castle. Sleep had been long and patient, shaped by careful layering, routine, and environmental knowledge. The chill of stone and winter air, ever present, was now a manageable backdrop, softened by the combination of human ingenuity and resilience. As light strengthened, the castle awakened slowly, carrying with it the quiet comfort and lessons of the night. Morning in a medieval castle arrived slowly. Light crept through narrow windows and shutters, painting soft patterns on stone walls and wooden beams. The air remained crisp, but the warmth built overnight from layered bedding. Heated stones, nightcaps, and shared body heat lingered in pockets throughout the room. Sleepers rose gradually, stretching limbs and shifting bodies carefully to preserve as much warmth as possible. Blankets and furs were rearranged or folded for reuse, footboxes emptied or prepared for another night, and nightcaps removed with gentle care. Even the smallest gestures carried purpose, ensuring comfort persisted as the castle transitioned from night to day. The sounds of the waking castle were muted at first. Distant footsteps, the low murmur of conversations, the faint crackle of fires being rekindled. These gentle noises complemented the body's slow awakening, providing reassurance and a sense of continuity. Though the chill of winter remained, the human body, its companions, and the thoughtfully prepared environment had endured it well. Warmth had been preserved through ritual, layering, positioning, and vigilance, allowing the night to pass with patience, comfort, and quiet resilience. In this final morning light, the castle's inhabitants could reflect on the subtle mastery of medieval sleep, a harmonious balance of human ingenuity, routine, and natural materials, ensuring that even the coldest nights were survived with grace and calm. Even after the first light of dawn touched the castle walls, the night's presence lingered softly in quiet corners and shadowed nooks. The warmth that had been carefully nurtured through layered blankets, heated stones, nightcaps, and shared bodies remained subtle but perceptible, like a comforting echo of rest. In the empty halls, the faint scent of wool, furs, and tallowed candles still lingered. The stones, once cold and imposing, now held the faint memory of heat, slowly releasing it to the air and anyone passing by. It was a quiet reminder of how every small preparation had worked together to transform the harshness of winter into a tolerable, almost gentle experience. For the castle's sleepers, the last moments of night offered reflection. Even as the day began, the body retained the comfort of careful routines. The mind carried the memory of deep, patient rest, and the heart held the reassurance that even in stone and cold, warmth and calm could be found. In this lingering stillness, there was a lesson in patience and preparation, that care, attention, and understanding of one's environment could create sanctuary, even in the most challenging conditions. The night had passed, but its quiet wisdom remained, guiding the day ahead. Even as the day began, the quiet comfort of the night remained, lingering like a soft blanket over stone and wood. The air, though cooler than the hearth or the heated stones, felt less biting because the body remembered warmth and the mind remembered calm. Inhabitants rose slowly, carrying the memory of deep, patient sleep. Movements were deliberate, stretching gently, adjusting layers of clothing and bedding, and savoring the subtle heat that persisted. Each breath was measured, unhurried, as if extending the peaceful rhythm of night into the waking hours. Outside, the wind whispered against towers and walls, but it no longer commanded attention. The castle had become a sanctuary, shaped by human ingenuity, ritual, and quiet care. Every layer, every precaution, every soft sound and shared presence had worked in harmony, creating a rhythm of resilience and comfort. Even as life continued and the castle stirred with activity, the essence of the night remained a gentle pulse of warmth, stillness, and patience. It was a reminder that even in cold, unyielding environments, preparation and presence could create peace, comfort, and restorative rest. Thank you for joining this journey into the quiet, patient nights of medieval castles. We've wandered through stone halls, layered blankets, heated stones, footboxes, nightcaps, and shared warmth, seeing how people long ago transformed cold, unyielding winters into nights of rest and calm. As you settle for sleep tonight, let the lessons of the past guide you. Create your own cocoon of comfort. Breathe slowly, feel the weight of blankets or furs, and allow warmth, whether real or imagined, to flow gently through your body. Let your mind drift with the rhythm of stillness, familiar sounds, and gentle presence, releasing tension and welcoming peace. May your night be slow, restorative, and safe. Let the chill fade into the background, softened by care, preparation, and calm, just as medieval sleepers experienced it in their stone chambers. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and comment. Share where you're watching from, whether the US, Europe, Canada, or elsewhere, and what time it is for you as you prepare for rest. Sleep well, and may your dreams be warm, peaceful, and serene.